here's a quick rundown of the latest 2024 release, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. He is the fiercest warrior in the Wasteland. There are at least hundreds of warriors like he, but this half-man, half-ghost is the ruler here. He is Immortan Joe, who drinks 3 kilograms of human milk a day. In the Wasteland, women are merely tools for reproduction, and these women belong solely to Immortan Joe. And there's a newcomer here today, the future Furiosa, the goddess of vengeance. Just days ago, she tried to sabotage the mob's motorcycles but was caught in the act. After stabbing a man, she turned and ran, blowing a whistle to call for help. Unfortunately, a cliff loomed ahead, and soon she was whipped down by a bone whip and taken away in a car. Mary, who followed the signal, chased on horseback but couldn't keep up and watched them get farther away. Luckily, after killing one man, Mary rode his motorcycle and continued the chase. However, after a day and night of pursuit, she still couldn't catch up. In the end, she killed another man but could only watch as her daughter was taken into the bandits' lair. The men can't help but go forward and take credit, but unfortunately everyone underestimates Furiosa. She was soon brought before Dr. Dementus, the leader of this area. Once his men confirmed Furiosa was healthy and well-nourished, he realized a resource-rich area must exist. Despite all questioning, Furiosa remained silent, and the only man who knew the location had his throat crushed. They didn't even try to heal him but hung him upside down to point the way. Seeing this, Furiosa kicked him, and the heavily injured man died instantly. She was then locked in a tent. Outside, Mary noticed an approaching sandstorm. She donned bandit clothes and sneaked into the camp with the storm. Quickly, she figured out the location and infiltrated. Initially planning to kill the women, she spared them when one cried, saying she was also a mother. Mary showed mercy, unaware this decision would cost her life. No sooner had the 2 men left than the woman reported the situation and the bandits raised their guns and fired, fortunately being stopped by the oil drums behind them. Escaping the camp, Mary threw off her burning coat and, despite the pain, continued fleeing with her daughter. Soon though she heard the roar of engines, and it didn't take long for the hordes to follow the scent. At the canyon, Mary found a good ambush spot. She had Furiosa drive away while she stayed to snipe and delay the pursuers. The bandits were blocked at the canyon entrance but soon surrounded by more enemies. Mary was captured, and Furiosa, hearing gunfire, didn't leave and saw it all. Rushing to her mother, Furiosa was also captured. Dementus threatened Furiosa with Mary's life to reveal the hideout's location. Mary stopped her, forcing Furiosa to watch her mother die. Afterward, she was locked in a cage by Dementus and followed her opponent as he kept wandering around killing people. To join them, one had to fight. Only the worst survived in the Wasteland. One day, while wandering, a red signal appeared in the sky, and the gang moved toward it. They found a boy with objects in his head, claiming his camp was full of supplies, even mountains of juice and vegetables. It was a trap, but Dementus, confident in his numbers, proceeded. It didn't take long for the locomotive unit to arrive at a canyon, and they first collectively twisted the throttle to let out a roar. Obviously wanting to give the other side a head start, they incited the enslaved refugees to rebel. Seeing success, they issued an ultimatum to the canyon dwellers, but they misjudged their opponents. The ruler was Immortan Joe, who drinks 3 kilograms of human milk daily. Joe stayed silent at Dementus's challenge, but his men spoke. He told the other man to choose one of the warriors above him, and the old man pointed to one of them at random. The chosen one is seen pulling out silver-plated spray paint. The chosen man, with spears in hand, leaped forward. Declaring thousands were ready to die for Joe. Battle erupted instantly. And because of the geographical location, Dementus men couldn't hit each other at all. And even more so, they didn't know the route up there, so they were immediately used as torches by the enemies above them, and they were beaten around. And in the end, they could only flee from the place. he immediately set his sights on the oil plant. The owner of this place has a close relationship with Immortan Joe, and has been providing him with fuel resources. He finally waited for the other party to go out and make a delivery after ambushing him for a long time. And since this area has always been under the rule of Immortan Joe, the other party didn't expect to be hijacked. And it didn't take long for the car to be seized by Dementus's men. Although the fuel was enough to last them for months, he wasn't satisfied. And that's when he came up with the idea of immediately having the Horned Man pick out a few of his bald subordinates, and then mixing the dug-up white sludge with petrol, stirring it up, and finally coating the men with it, with the obvious intention that they would disguise themselves as Immortan Joe's henchmen to see if they could infiltrate the oil plant and take it down. It didn't take long for the scouts at the square post to realize the situation and immediately called to report back to the boss, stating that their vehicle was being chased and asking for instructions on whether or not to open the gate to receive them. However, the cautious leader sensed something was amiss and didn't easily order the gate to be opened. Seeing no signs of the gate opening, Dementus immediately ordered his men to start a real fight. When he saw casualties, he quickly ordered the gate to be opened. The truck then smoothly entered the oil refinery, while the rest were driven back by flamethrowers at the gate. Suddenly, several bikers emerged from under the truck, swiftly running towards the gate controls. By the time he realized, it was too late. Dementus's main force was already at the gate, and as it was seized, he knew he was doomed. But even though Dementus captured the oil mill, he had a problem with him over it. Not long after, Immortan Joe received a package, a severed finger. Provoked, Immortan Joe prepared to kill the sender. Soon, Dementus arrived with his men, fully prepared. They declared that if they didn't return by nightfall, their men left behind would blow up the refinery. Hearing this, Immortan Joe had to abandon his plan to kill them. After the battle, Dementus realized Immortan Joe's formidable strength, even stronger than his own. Reluctant to engage in a mutually destructive fight, he offered to continue supplying fuel in exchange for the necessary food. At that moment, Immortan Joe noticed a figure in the crowd. Dementus quickly said it was his daughter. Clearly, Immortan Joe had his eyes on Furiosa. He proposed that if they left the girl, their deal would be settled, and the supplies would be provided as agreed. Faced with significant benefits, the decision was made swiftly.
You behave, I'll behave. I'll protect Gastown from all treachery. It will be as impenetrable as this Citadel.
After Dementus and the others leave, Furiosa is also put into a silo, which is full of Immortan Joe's fertility tool people. Because she was young, Immortan Joe didn't act immediately, but his son had other plans. That night, Furiosa then cuts off her hair and subsequently attaches it all to her hat, as she is already making preparations to escape from the place. Late at night, Rictus sneaks into the silo and steals Furiosa out, and after helping her out of her bonds, Rictus admires her hair. The next second, Furiosa pulled a fast one and escaped. She smeared her face with black grease and ran through the tunnel to the outside. By the time the strong men arrived, she was long gone. They noticed Rictus's strange behavior and immediately questioned him. He quickly threw the hair away, and no one saw Furiosa hanging from a pipe. Fearing Immortan Joe's wrath, Rictus didn't dare mention her disappearance. In this post-apocalyptic world, where human life was cheap, a person's death or disappearance was insignificant. As time passed, everyone forgot about Furiosa. She hadn't escaped but disguised herself as a boy and worked as a mechanic. One day, due to weather conditions, the machinery malfunctioned. The small-statured Furiosa was assigned the task. She swung on a rope to the dangling car and swiftly approached the hook. She resecured the hook, completing the task, becoming a useful tool. Afterwards, they are assigned to build a huge chariot to be used in conjunction with Jack's outings to trade for supplies. With everyone's combined efforts, a monstrous tanker was built. Then, a group of dozens set out for the Bullet Farm, and Furiosa secretly hid under the truck, sneaking along with them. Unfortunately, they were soon ambushed, and a firefight ensued. Unexpectedly, the enemy had an air force, causing heavy casualties on the truck. The warriors' suicidal attacks troubled the enemy. And a run-over motorcycle almost took Furiosa's life. Jack noticed the truck's sudden slowdown and realized there was an issue with the fuel line. His deputy immediately opened the steel plate to repair it. Noticing the problem, he immediately asked for parts from above. However, Before he could start repairing it, the other side unexpectedly appeared with a new troop type. A sudden attack caused the man to fall, discovering Furiosa hiding under the truck. Unable to hold on, he handed the hose to her. Just then, a motorcycle placed a bomb under the truck. Realizing the urgency, Furiosa had to act, as an explosion would mean her death. As she prepared to defuse the bomb, the enemy spotted her. The slow truck allowed them to climb up from behind. Furiosa fixed the fuel line, improving the situation. However, another mishap occurred. A dead airman fell and damaged the radiator. Furiosa had to rush to the front line again. She restored the skull head, solving the immediate problem. The two then easily dealt with the enemies through mutual cooperation, but the enemy's special forces were endless. Just after this wave, a glider came and kept dropping kerosene to attack the trucks. Fortunately, Jack had prepared defensive measures in advance, preventing the two of them from being burned to a crisp. But soon another motorbike pops up and starts strafing Furiosa. Unfortunately, he's a lousy shot and ends up firmly trapped by Furiosa with an arrow through his thigh. Taking advantage of the enemy reloading, Furiosa launched her final attack. After eliminating the enemy, only the two of them remained on the truck. Furiosa tried to take control of the truck but was pushed off by Jack, leaving her standing alone in the desolate wasteland. In that moment, she was bewildered, unsure of where to go or what to do. But soon, Jack returned, facing Furiosa's gun. Jack remained calm, knowing they had fought side by side in battle. With no food or transportation, Furiosa had nowhere to go and ultimately stayed with Jack as his assistant. When reinforcements arrived, they quickly reached the bullet farm, where crates of vegetables were loaded up, and bullets were poured down. After leaving the farm, Jack handed Furiosa a gun, indicating that everything was prepared for her and she could leave whenever she wanted. Shortly after, they arrive at their second destination, Petrol Town, which is literally devoid of order because of Dementus' lack of leadership. While receiving supplies, Dementus appeared beside Furiosa. Seeing her enemy, she instinctively gripped her gun tightly. Jack suddenly appeared and separated the two, knowing that even if Furiosa could kill him now, they wouldn't be able to escape and would only end up dead. This transaction did not go smoothly. Starving refugees rioted, and Dementus's men couldn't control them, resulting in all the food being lost and no fuel obtained. Had it not been for Dementus leading the way, the truck might have been torn apart by the refugees. Before leaving, Dementus asked Jack to tell Immortan Joe that he planned to organize a warlord meeting in 3 days. Back at the fortress, they reported to Immortan Joe. Everyone was furious and discussed how to eliminate Dementus, paying no attention to Furiosa, who had changed significantly over time. Immortan Joe ordered Jack to return to the bullet farm to gather more weapons for the upcoming battle. When Jack treats the wounds on Furiosa's body that night, he also notices the tattoo on her arm, which he instantly realizes is the map to the oasis. Having been through so much together, the two had formed a bond. Jack told Furiosa that if she needed him, he would help her find a way home. The next day, they set off again, but halfway through the journey, Jack ordered a stop, moving Furiosa from the driver's seat to a small vehicle at the back. Clearly, Jack had a premonition that this mission might not go smoothly. The situation was not what he expected, and as the convoy entered the farm again, Jack was keenly aware that it was somewhat eerily quiet, and immediately ordered a stop, followed by the sight of a dog with a mutilated limb in its mouth as well. At first glance, he recognized it as Dementus's inseparable dog and quickly issued a warning. Only Furiosa, positioned at the rear, managed to retreat in time and escape before the gate closed. Jack and the others were trapped inside, and soon the warriors were slaughtered, leaving only Jack, who barely survived with Furiosa's help. Realizing the crisis of the situation, Jack gets into the car again, knowing he will drive away a few more people even if he dies. He reversed the car, knocking down enemies behind him, easing Furiosa's immediate danger. Then, he signaled to the sky, which Furiosa understood as his command for her to leave first. However, she didn't go far before stopping. She wasn't one to abandon her companions, just as she hadn't abandoned her mother years ago. At this moment, Jack was driving the truck in circles inside the farm, while Furiosa provided cover with a rifle. Although Dementus lacked leadership skills, his combat abilities were formidable. The ruthless man soon found a way. Seeing this, Jack, enraged, drove the truck straight at him. Dementus, agile as ever, grabbed a nearby railing as countless bullets rained down, nearly knocking him to the ground. A hand reached out from the dirt. Furiosa was still alive. However, Jack encountered a problem. Jack on the other side, however, has a problem, as the truck he's driving is blocked by the enemy with a tower crane, and the steel frame accidentally gets tangled with the rear of the vehicle, which is then pulled and yanked towards the pit. Jack tried to stabilize the vehicle with a claw, but the force was too great to overcome. Seeing this, the refugees below began to scatter in panic. Jack and Furiosa quickly rode motorcycles to the gate, then switched to a car and sped away. Meanwhile, Dementus was rescued by his man and immediately gave chase with a large group. Due to the performance gap between the vehicles, they were quickly caught. In the ensuing fight, Jack was hit, and Dementus nearly twisted Furiosa's arm off with a car wheel. Heavily injured and with no support, the two were quickly knocked out, though not killed. Their fate was undoubtedly grim. Dementus ordered his men to tie Jack to a motorcycle and run laps around the pit, while Furiosa was hung from the back of a go-kart by her broken arm. Clearly, he had no intention of letting them off easily. Fortunately, Furiosa had changed so much that Dementus didn't recognize her, or the consequences might have been worse. In this way, Jack is dragged from day to night, while the roiling yellow sand swept up by the motorbike serves to help Furiosa. When Dementus was ready to return, he found Furiosa had vanished, leaving only a lone arm on the chain. At this moment, Furiosa was riding a motorcycle towards the castle, and when Dementus tried to give chase, his car suddenly fell apart. Unable to pursue, he sent his man, but Furiosa quickly lost them. When the locomotive ran out of petrol, she had to walk to the castle, and there on a mound was a man watching her. Thought it must be Max, who was the Bloodmaster. Upon returning to the castle, Furiosa immediately found Immortan Joe, informing him of the takeover of Bullet Farm and warning that Dementus, armed with hooks and ladders, would target the castle next. However, Immortan Joe's son stated that it was a petrol town that was burning and didn't believe her at all. Finally, Immortan Joe decides to send troops to Petrol Town under false pretenses. Soon the enemy baiting force will formally set off. They installed special devices in the rear of the car, driving between the rolling up of the sky yellow sand. Just 5 cars, but seems to be a large force. And Dementus, naturally, picks up on this and confidently kicks off his escape against Immortan Joe, at which point the broken-armed Furiosa plants a robotic arm on himself. The 40-day war in the Wasteland erupted in full force. This was the most spectacular part of the story, but it couldn't be depicted due to the violence and bloodshed. In the end, Dementus was defeated and fled. Upon hearing the news, Furiosa rushed to the battlefield and seized the only repaired war vehicle during a quarrel between 2 brothers. Dementus, now left with few men, soon faced Furiosa again, who further thinned his ranks. At this moment, he was already scared out of his wits and didn't have a single thought of wanting to resist. Finally, he decided to split up and flee. Furiosa, crossing the dunes, spotted the situation and headed straight for the protected 3-wheeler. However, she soon realized the person wasn't Dementus and quickly braked. Furiosa then saw the people on her right being killed by a mob. In his desperation, Dementus drove straight into a sandstorm. When he regained consciousness, the weather had cleared, and Furiosa was behind him. Dementus tried to shoot but found he had no bullets, so he ran. Furiosa followed him in the car, not speeding up or honking. Dementus soon realized the futility of his escape. Turning to face Furiosa, he saw the car slowly reversing. He understood she was humiliating him, just as he had once humiliated Jack. In anger, he threw his gun at the car but ultimately chose to surrender for survival. Furiosa approached him slowly.
Remember me?
You fabulous thing.
Dementus kept glancing at the dagger in front of him as he talked. Suddenly, he reached for it but found it had no blade. Furiosa knocked him out with a gun, but he awoke to find himself tied up and finally realized the avenging woman before him was the little girl he had once tormented. The story didn't specify Dementus's fate. Some say Furiosa executed him on the spot, others that he was dragged to death behind a motorcycle like Jack. A third, more plausible rumor suggests Furiosa planted the peach pit from Oasis on Dementus. Years later, she plucked the fruit and offered it to Wu Meiji,